Children who are abused also become observers of human nature. We learn to see signs, behavior patterns, and even words that are being said that raise red flags that will tell us exactly who someone is and what they are really about. The man who abused me was arrogantly and boastfully proud of the way he treated me. I was used many times as a way for him to try to provoke a reaction out of other adults. Um, Sadly, not many people stood up to that man. Didn't matter that um, an over 200-pound man that was over 6 foot was punching a 10-year-old little girl in the face. Um, again, back then, beating your child was considered being a good parent. I still have trouble accepting that parents can be so delusional, because even if I hadn't been abused as a child, I would have never felt the need to discipline my children in that way. And I grew up in an era where children were walking around with broken bones and black eyes from their very own parents, and parents were congratulated for putting their children in line. So I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of human nature. I've seen quite a lot of how personalities are formed when it comes to child predators. The one thing you can absolutely guarantee on is that they know exactly what they are doing. They are not incapable of controlling themselves. Abuse has nothing at all to do with love. I don't know where people ever got that absurd fucking idea anyway. What is so loving about an adult forcing himself on a child? Child sexual abuse is about control. It is about deliberately trying to kill the innocence of a child because that person themselves had lost their innocence. They had lost their innocence. It is about deliberately setting out to try to destroy a child because someone had did it to them. It is about revenge, but on other people. Because I was told at a young age that child predators are unable to help themselves by educated professionals at that. I was terrified to have my own children. I was terrified to be around children. I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to help myself. But I never had any of those thoughts. I never wanted to touch children in the way that I was touched. I never wanted to treat children in the way that I was treated. In fact, I somehow ended up with way too much empathy, way too much emotion. It's like I have the empathy of a 6-year-old child, and I'm 49 years old. Now, I want to get another thing straight. I'm not saying that abuse does not turn someone narcissistic. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that anybody who lays a hand on a child is doing it deliberately. It's especially in that way. It's not as simple as people seem to believe it is. The fact that the man who abused me had been able to live in the very same town for so long and abuse so many people, and not one person ever do anything about it, still disturbs me. This nation was convinced that when adults rape children, it is the child's fault and the adult can't help themselves. They were convinced that this was true, that so much so that they would protect the adult and punish the child. I not only became the scapegoat in my family, I became the scapegoat in the neighborhood too. Parents were warning their children to stay away from me, claiming that I was trouble, even though they were barbecuing with the man they knew was my abuser. The town I grew up in has spread so much gossip and lies about me because the adults I grew up with back in the 70s and 80s knew exactly what was happening, and they didn't do anything. In fact, they lied on me. That right there, that, like, where was the morality? I mean, I feel that even if I wasn't abused, I would still have enough morality in me to understand that a child who is being abused is not a child that is okay, and it is never their fault. And the fact that so many generations of families deliberately enforce corporal punishment onto their children and praise it as good parenting, I still find to be astonishing. Anyway, I went off track, which is going to happen sometimes. I have complex PTSD, and that's something I'll have for the rest of my life. Chronic dissociation, which I can learn to identify some triggers and lessen my dissociative moments, but because I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my early 40s, it's set in. It's part of my personality, of my DNA. Anyway, back on the subject matter. Every action that a child predator takes is a very well thought out and deliberate action. It could be, like I said, it could be the father, the mother, male, female, it doesn't matter, uncle, aunt, cousin, family, friend, and it is usually the adult who delights in making children feel uncomfortable. The adult who continues to push a child's boundary, keeps touching a child when the child tells them no. The adult who walks into the room and your child runs and hides. There is a reason for that. The last place that I hung out, because I've isolated myself. I've been alone now for 7 years after so many years of dealing with nothing but narcissistic people. I kind of gave up on humanity. But I was dating this dude, and his niece and I would hang out. She was a younger girl, and I noticed that every time his one friend came over, she would run and hide. The first time she heard him come in the door, The look on her face was one of absolute fright. And she froze and she said, "Hide me, I don't like him." That is the kind of person you need to look out for. Uh, People need to realize that when it comes to child predators, they will always make sure they have access to children in some way. Any career that involves children is going to have a high rate of child predators applying and working in that very career. As if that isn't obvious. I mean, look at this, all the accusations with schools, churches, you know, you'd think that'd be something that's totally obvious by now, but I've learned that people will only see what they are able to accept as truth themselves, regardless of who gets hurt. And personally, I am tired of victims of child abuse having to deal with people like this. When we have a justice system that is alleged to prosecute people like this, we have technology that can monitor and track everyone in the world, but they can't somehow monitor and track child predators. People, there is no such thing as coincidences. Everything and everyone is connected. And when it comes to child predators, it is a very deliberate plan of action. Maybe those are the wrong words. I don't want to have to record and re-record, so if I fuck up and I'll restart, I'm just going to fuck up and restart. The way that child abuse and molestation is handled by the justice system and the organizations involved is deliberately causing harm to children. They do not take it seriously. The lawyers are educated to believe that accusations of child abuse are false, when in fact less than 2% have turned out to be false. The courts are very well known for granting full custody to abusers and child predators. It is a systematic, trauma-based system that creates ripples of effects throughout generations. Illnesses, diseases, poverty, addictions,